All right, welcome everybody to this week's edition of There's a Solution for That podcast. We've got a great guest here today, Cody Dixon from Alvarez Marsal. We are going to be talking about tax compliance and how to manage that tax compliance as your business scales through technology. And so Cody will have a chance to kind of tell you a little bit about himself and what his firm does, and then we'll kind of get into it. So, anyways, welcome Cody to the
Yeah,
show.
great. Glad to be here.
So just kick it off. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and especially like Alvarez Marsal. I know it's a big
Great.
company. There's a lot of things you guys do, but in terms of tax compliance and things like that, what's the big emphasis?
Yeah, so I'm a managing director at Alvarez and Marsal in our tax practice, and I focus on largely indirect tax technology solutions for our clients, and that's kind of one area down the chain of what we do at A&M or Alvarez and Marsal or A&M. And so A&M, one of the areas where we focus in on is we are at one of North America's #1 bankruptcy and restructuring firm.
Hmm.
And so we do a lot of that work that's there. And as you might imagine, there's a lot of complications around tax that extends into that. And so we help our clients do turnaround services and consulting around that as well. And then there's kind of a other side of the coin of that is helping companies perform better. So you may not necessarily be in a restructuring, situation for a company, but maybe you want to perform better if you want to grow. And so that's another area where we focus in on is performance improvement. And then another area where tax gets involved quite a bit is mergers and acquisitions. So one of the things that we say at A&M is M&A. And so kind of following the pattern of restructuring and into M&A work, there's kind of a close parallel between those two avenues. And so we focus a lot on that. And then, that from an M&A perspective, you get a look at really the company as a whole. And so of that, tax is a component of it. And so that's one of the areas where, as a firm, where we get involved and, really being, downstream of those two big, problem areas that we're trying to be available for our clients with restructuring and performance improvement. Tax is kind of peppered all throughout those areas. And so we get a lot of chances to talk
Yeah.
with clients and help them across a variety of different ways, from a technical standpoint, and then down to where I focus in on is largely on a technology or a tax technology area.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, so being from Texas, where we're located, anytime you mention A&M, of course, that you're either going to go, yes, I love A&M, and I've been there, or and that was my school, or is be like, I hate them and A&M, and they were our rivals. So, and of course, let's not forget about all the A&M Aggie jokes. So
Oh
I
yes,
won't
yes,
ask you
yeah,
to.
they're definitely out there. Yeah, I joined A&M about 2 years ago, and the challenging thing for me is being a Texan my entire life is our color scheme is not maroon. But other than that, it takes a little bit of getting used to. So
Fantastic. Well, I'm just going to kind of mirror back a few things that I heard in your overview, because I want to make sure that the people that are listening are really super clear on what you guys do. And I think you've explained it very well. But so it sounds like to me you guys are handling all the big events that might happen in a large or scaling or significantly downscaling type of business, right? So if you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, at some point you might be an acquisition target, right? And so
yep.
helping through that type of thing, or if you've been disrupted in your industry, the market, the economy, what have you, you might be on the downside and looking to get out of it, restructure. I think, like you mentioned, performance improvement. That's something I'm a little bit more curious about learning about. It's like, what are the types of things that you guys do to help a company perform better, so that they don't have to think about a bankruptcy at some point in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, maybe yeah, like thinking about that from my vantage point, we're looking to we really kind of use the M&A event as a kind of a way to really evaluate what the historical challenges were, and then what needs to change post-transaction in order to either be moving in the right direction or remediate something that was wrong in the past or something along those lines. And that's really where the birth of kind of the performance improvement process kind of comes together, where we're looking at, well, what have you done? Where do you want to go? What are you being acquired into? What is that those facts and circumstances look like? And then how can you potentially, put together a technology-based solution that will remedy these things, going forward. And that's really kind of the strategy that's there for performance improvement. And then if you think about that, if you take that idea and that approach, that applies even if you're not in a restructuring situation. So you can go in and we can talk to folks about what you've done in the past and where you want to go in the future. And then that's where the performance improvement comes
Yeah.
in. But like all things, the catalyst of an acquisition kind of helps you. It's kind of like inviting somebody over to your house. You kind of got to get everything in order, get everything clean, get everything set up. So things that maybe
Yeah.
you knew that you needed to do, that you haven't done, you've put off for a while, you need to go take care of that sort of thing. And so that's one of the kind of the approach that we would take to is that, getting everything ready, getting everything squared away, fix the past and prepare for the future.
Well, so like one of the we've actually had a few other episodes on this show with people specifically addressing things like how to increase your value, how do you value a business, things like that, and so I'm all those are related to a buy sell transaction, right? And so I'm curious, like from your vantage point, what are some of the commonalities that you see when you go in and evaluate a business? Like, what are some of the problems that you consistently see showing up that if I was an owner or a business leader, I can maybe be thinking about so that I'm not putting myself in a bad position in a year or 2 years or 5 years. Tell us a little bit more about some of those common things that you see that are issues that need to get solved.
Yeah, so I mean, the most common thing that I see and then I'm brought into is really it's sales and use tax compliance.
Really.
So from that perspective, companies doing business, maybe they've got some remote, maybe not remote, but digital form of delivery like e-commerce, that sort of thing, and they may not necessarily understand all the areas where they're supposed to be charging and collecting and remitting sales tax and so
Hmm.
forth. And so that's been probably the biggest aspect of that we see. That tends to be one of the big items that comes up in the M&A world as well. Is they're looking at sales tax exposure, because if there's an acquisition, they may be carrying problems with them into the acquisition that they'd have to remediate.
That's
It also
interesting.
becomes kind of a negotiation, our topic of negotiation among the deals if there is exposure items and things along those lines. And so, and that's a variety of things too. As you look down the lens, it's one just are you charging, your sales? Are you charging sales tax appropriately? That's one aspect of it. Are you remitting it correctly? Do you have the documentation to support a lot of the data that's there when it's needed? And those are kind of some common things that are there. But that tends to be by far the biggest area where we get involved, as well as the natural progression of that is, okay, well, how do we solve this with technology? And not necessarily put more people on it, hire more folks, or do those things, although those could be options that are there. But how do you get systems in place and processes as well as people in place in order to make that not an issue going forward?
Right. Well, I know you and I are both big fans of Avalara, and we've worked with them for years. And that as a technology solution is incredible. We love it. We actually use it, in our own business, so we know it works. um, so and obviously very very happy with it. I'm glad to see you guys kind of supporting that effort too. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, until you're going through a transaction like that, it's probably not something that's completely on your radar. Like this is a problem waiting to surface, in a transaction. But it sounds like the moral of the story here is, whether if someone was trying to buy a business, they want to know that taxes have been paid. There's not this mounting liability or this unknown liability that's just getting larger and larger and larger out there. Like if you've been running a business for years, sort of under the radar of taxes, and maybe should have been filing, maybe should have been registering, maybe should have been collecting.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a small exposure or it could be a massive millions of dollars exposure. So um, that's fascinating. And obviously you start the risks get bigger and bigger as the company gets bigger and bigger. So it's better to
Yeah.
head that off earlier. So, but when you talk about performance improvement, are you specifically talking about technology solutions like Avalara, or are you thinking, or is this more of a broader topic?
It's more of a broader topic. Although I don't like to say you can do technology last. As a technology guy, I like to say you want to kind of put it up front or put it in conjunction with other avenues. But if you think about performance improvement, even though we are both big fans of Avalara, we do implementations, we use it, we recommend it to our clients, you know, and for our clients, the first step is, are you doing the right things? And so you can do the right things without technology. But from a performance improvement standpoint, you are going to get better, stronger, faster if you're doing those in conjunction with a technology-based
Right.
solution. And so I think that's really the key, is kind of looking at them. Yeah, you can do, one domino can knock the other one over, or you can kind of look at it, bringing it together and say, hey, look, let's have kind of a good combination of, let's find out what the right answers are, and then put those in systems and controls in place in order to move forward.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I know that like when you and I met initially, this last year, we had a healthy debate about AI and its role in companies, and I'm curious, just again, what you've seen in terms of technology. I mean, there's a lot of buzz out there about AI and how it can solve all the world's problems, it seems. And so I'm curious, just from your perspective, what role do you see AI playing in a real way, like in a tangible way, with these companies that you guys are out there helping?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the AI continues to move forward. I think the prevailing trend, and if you're looking out, today, this being first week in 2025, a lot of predictions around AI agents, where they're doing, you have AI functioning in different tools and capacities and decision making, and even kind of chaining AI agents with more AI agents. So it's going to be interesting, not just from a tax perspective, but from just a operations perspective. That seems to be kind of the trend where a lot of the technology areas are going. So when it comes to AI, one of the things that I think that kind of the right approach to this is, you know, you if you're looking for AI to solve the problem, I think it's still going to run into issues. And what I mean by that is, there's been, we've seen documented hallucinations or AI getting things wrong, particularly large language models, and using that as a basis for decision making. And I think the reality of it is the underlying technology is always going to be that way. Now, it's going to get better, stronger, faster over time, but there's always going to be a chance that it gets something wrong. And so, like, kind of a practical approach, and then maybe some examples here. A practical approach is, I I don't think that a lot of companies that have been around for more than, we'll call it 3 years since the generative AI, has really kind of come on the scene. I don't think that their problems back then were waiting for AI to solve them. In other words, they could have solved their problems in the past. And so what I would say is, I think, from an AI like solution is not to be scared of it, but to think of it from the perspective of, maybe you don't use AI to solve your problem. Maybe you use AI to help build the tool that solves the problem. So a
Yeah,
little bit, kind of one way to get to another, but that's kind of the area where, I would recommend. And, I think a lot of folks have already experienced these tools, at least, in maybe I don't want to say silly, but an odd, like, in a way, in terms of, a creative way or a creative outlet, in terms of, turning it into a tax song or something along those
right.
lines. But the reality of it is that I think these tools, they have some potential to help out, and you're going to have to craft those the right way. And if you just think, it's kind of like, in a similar fashion, the software solutions, it's not the acquisition of the software that's that's going to save you. It's acquiring the software, but also, you know, carefully and thoughtfully implementing it into your business is what's
Yeah.
really going to create the value. And I don't think that changes too much with AI. It just gives you a new set of tools that you potentially could work with, or a new set of skills that you could
Yeah.
use to build tools to solve, hopefully old problems that are out there. So
Yeah. Well, I like how you reference it as a tool. And so, when I think about, I'm kind of a handy guy around the house, and put the TV on the wall, and do some stuff that requires some tools. And so I think of tools as, hey, it's not just the only tool you've got, right? It's a tool that you can use, but don't forget about all the other tools that still work really, really well.
yeah,
And so, yeah, using the tool when it's appropriate, I think is great.
yeah,
I've been around long enough to have people talk about robotic process automation and machine learning, and then
yep,
it was
yeah,
Bitcoin, blockchain, in NTFs or NFTs,
yes,
right? And so, I'm hoping that AI isn't just another in a long list of things people do and try.
yeah,
And I think, like you've said, and we've seen, people are using it out there. I know I meet a lot of people, and they're like, they swear by it, like it's amazing, and it does all these things for them. And I
yep,
think, right time, right place, right use case, that tool can be very, very effective.
yeah,
But I think it
yeah,
is also funny that you talk about how, sometimes the initial use cases are kind of silly. And isn't that true, right? It's like
hmm,
when the iPhone came out, the first app wasn't, some productivity app. It was, Flappy Bird or something, right? And
yeah,
yeah, or it's cut the rope, or Angry
yeah. The
Birds or
the
something like
entertainment
that.
usually comes first. So
Yeah, yeah, and then of course in NFTs, it wasn't like real, like, Mona Lisa type works of art. It was icons and different things like that people
sports, yeah,
or what was it, those avatars that people play in video games and things like that. So, well, anyways, that's fantastic. Well, so let's get back on the topic of tax management, because I know that was
yeah.
one of the things you mentioned is, your firm does tax management. For just the person listening to this episode, what does tax management really mean? Like if I was to observe someone managing their taxes, on a day-to-day basis, what does that typically look like?
Yeah, so I think, at a high level, you don't have any tax exposure. I think that's like if you're managing your tax correctly, there's not any nagging compliance that hasn't been done, and you're up to date. So I think that's kind of the goal of it. But from a day-to-day perspective, I mean the day-to-day side of it, and business through transactions. So anytime you have transactions, there's potential tax considerations and things to think about. And so I think from that perspective, day-to-day wise, that's what that potentially would look like. You have a lot of transactions, then your day's going to be a little bit busier. If you have fewer, then maybe not so much. But I think from a day-to-day perspective, there's kind of two periods, looking at what's happening at the transactional period, and then, measuring things over at a period of time. Do you have everything in order? You don't have to do income tax every day, but, you're gonna have to do it over a period of time. So you want to make sure that transactionally, the more you're doing at that point in time, the better off you're going to be whenever you have these longer period of measurements. So I think,
Yeah.
from a tax management standpoint, that's kind of one of the areas where, you kind of would expect people to do that. So, and I think, like thinking from like a small business to a large business, small businesses, I mean, I don't want to say taxes, maybe thinking about more selling, creating more sales transactions, not necessarily creating an opportunity for tax liability or a tax reporting that comes with that. And so, So you may or may not have that component of it. And I think that's where, kind of that going back, that performance improvement, having systems and processes in place can help
Yep.
really alleviate some of that like concern that you may have something that's going on there that's not happening the way you'd expect. You put those things in place, and then when you go to conduct your transactions, you can have confidence that certain things are going to happen in succession over that to make sure that you're compliant for tax purposes. And I think that's really kind of the goal to it, of what you want to do. The other, I think the challenge of it is if you don't do it up front, then you're kind of forced to react to it whenever it comes up, whether that's an audit or, a customer calling back, hey, this doesn't look
Yeah.
right, or something along those lines. And so, to the point of, management, there's, as good as you can be, as best, the best systems you can have in place, you're still going to have scenarios where, you're
Yep.
going to have to make adjustments, or, you mentioned being handy, how many times you start a project and that project that you went out to do turned into a little bit more project, or even
It
another
always does.
project
Always
that
does.
comes out of that. And that happens with transactions, dealing with customers. You have certain facts and circumstances, and then things, you're kind of in the same transaction or quote, and things change, and kind of have to adjust accordingly. And
Yep.
and when those all those tax levers are not firing throughout that process, then you might potentially be in those situations where you have to react or fix something that happened in the past. And so
Perfect.
so I think from a management perspective, thinking through what that looks like, doing things beforehand, making sure that in a normal course of business, all these things happen. And whenever things don't happen in a normal course of business, making sure you have the appropriate, procedures or technology, or both, in place so that you can react accordingly and it not be a big drain on your time.
Got it. Got it. There's so many questions that are going through my head right now. So it's like there's so many ways that we could approach this topic. It's a big topic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm transactionally, right? You've got sales tax, maybe use tax on the buy
Mhm.
side. You've got payroll, all those payroll related taxes.
Oh yeah.
But then I think you had mentioned earlier, like excise taxes, duties. I mean, not every company is doing import, export, and things like that. But it sounds like you guys handle that as well, or help with that.
Yeah, we do. So one of the areas where we help out with a lot is customs and trade compliance. So if you
Okay.
do have a company that's importing goods or exporting goods out of the country, then those become areas of opportunity. And then one area where I focus in quite a bit is duty drawback. And duty drawback is if you import something, you pay duties on it, and it's either subsequently exported or destroyed domestically, then you may have an opportunity to reclaim some of those import duties that were paid. And so that's a situation where it's not it's what I like to call elective compliance. Duty drawback is a privilege and not necessarily a right.
Right.
So ultimately, this is a scenario where you could put yourself in you may have an opportunity to take on more compliance than it would be necessary to ship or destroy goods, or export or destroy goods, in order to be compliant to claim a refund on the import side. So from a
Right.
tax perspective, there's also, it's not just complying with the rules and regulations, although it is that's a big part of it, but there's also some incentives that are out there, duty drawback being one, and there's others that are out there as well, where you can do some additional compliance to comply with the requirements for refunds, credits, and other incentives that are out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, we had definitely help out folks in the duty drawback space, but then also other credits and base incentives and things that are out there too. We do the work opportunity tax credit, or WOTC, as well, which has to do with hiring certain types of individuals and receiving qualified a tax credit for qualified wages
Right.
that you pay them. So
Right.
there's other programs that are out there that I think can be a value add to a business to help grow. So from a tax management, yeah, I think, yeah, you always think the obvious answer, which is don't have any exposure items
Right.
anywhere. But there's also, a proactive approach to it, of looking at tax in ways like, hey, where are we trying to go in the future? Are there ways that we can, bring more capital in through credits and incentives to help fund those desires for growth?
Right. Yeah, no, good stuff. And gosh, I mean, just the amount of complexity that one businesses get into and that you guys help manage is got to be just kind of overwhelming. In fact, so one of my questions is kind of like, what is the trigger that makes somebody want to call you? And so before we get to that, I want to just share that also that thought that's in my head, which is, as an owner of a business, I mean, my hands are full, right? I mean, I've got stuff. I'm trying to manage a team. I'm trying to lead a team. I'm trying to grow a business. I'm trying to do all this stuff. And hopefully I've got good people on my team that are helping, run this business, regardless of what size it is. I can just imagine, as an owner, how there's stuff out there I'm just not even aware of, right? I don't even know that I have a problem. I don't even know that I need to be talking about this. So, and let alone me saying, hey, I need to go just randomly call somebody up and ask them about tax compliance. That's probably not something I'm going to do. So tell me a little bit more about maybe what are those triggers, or why, when do people decide to pick up the phone and call you guys to help them navigate this stuff?
Yeah, I mean the obvious trigger that we've alluded to or talked about a little bit so far has been transactional. So if you are thinking, what I would say is that maybe transactional may be the actual thing that's there, but as a business owner, maybe you're thinking you want to grow, and growth can look at a variety of different ways. You may want to keep everything the same and grow over time, or you're looking to grow through acquisition. And so I think thinking about the future is probably the best catalyst about like where you should be thinking about how to manage tax, bring somebody in and talk somebody, because I think the first thing that you would want to know, and trying to go from where you are today to where you want to be, is what are what are the things that you don't know about, right? And that's, I think, where having some advisors on board that you can help ask questions, or do very much what we're doing, just sitting down and talking. Hey, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to be. Hey, what considerations, what would you think about, like, how does technology play into it, how does tax play into it? There's a variety of different things that I think that come up with. And so I think as a being someone who wants to grow their business, that's probably the area where I'd start, is looking out in the future. I've always told folks this over my career, just in coaching and mentoring, is, hey, you want to kind of find out what you want to do this year and what you want to do in the next 5 years. And that's like, I think that's a good conversation for people to have, especially at the business level. Where do you want to be next year? And then where do you want to be 5 years from now? And then
Right.
that you can help kind of formulate a vision. And then, if you think about your business, tax is definitely a spoke of that, right? You have to consider it. Technology is a spoke. You have to consider it. A lot of things that are there. And so that's where, I think A&M can be,
Yeah.
the catalyst there to help bring that together, as well as help customers and businesses connect with other areas to help them achieve those growths. As I mentioned, we're very connected in the M&A space as well. So maybe you need to kind of broaden your network and look at what other industries, other companies are doing, and and get a good idea how you want to strategize for the future.
No, that's awesome. Well, so let's say that you and I were sitting at a dinner table. We had a couple other folks sitting at our table, business owners, leaders of a business, and you were just kind of giving them a few just off the cuff, one or two tips, or next steps specifically, like to make sure that they are in compliance and that they're managing the tax, not having taxes manage them. What are some of the, maybe just those one or two tips as a starting point would you be recommending to folks that you're just sitting there having dinner with?
Yeah, I think maybe the question I might ask to that first would be, is there something going on from a tax perspective that you're unclear on? And I think, most, and I say that because I think there's probably a situation that most people who are running a business may be unclear on, or they like to have that kind of shored up for them.
Okay.
And the follow-up to that would be, what can we do to help clear that up for you? And so the tangible side of that is where A&M could help, is coming into that following that question and saying, well, maybe we need to do especially in the sales tax space, a reverse audit. We'll look at everything that's happened in the past, find out any exposure items, and go forward, something along those lines. Something that would be a way to kind of really bring up some of those uncertainties, firm them up, and then form your strategy on where to go forward from there. So, so yeah, this is probably where I would, a couple questions I would start with is, making sure that you feel good that's there, and then, I think inviting some folks in to evaluate where you are as a business is a good spot, especially if you're sitting there at that table thinking, man, I might be looking to be acquired or to acquire in the near future. I think both of those situations are scenarios where you that may be something that traditionally you haven't done, so you need to prepare for. So it's not in
Yeah.
your wheelhouse in terms of your day-to-day operations. But how would you merge a new acquisition into your business operations? What does that look like?
Right.
Those are, I think, and then what does that look like from a tax perspective as well, and legal entity structuring, all that kind of stuff as well. So I think those are, kind of good things to think about in terms of process operations, as well as, just big picture of where they might fit in terms of growth through selling or through acquiring.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think this is a good segue into our show's conclusion and wrap up. And so it sounds like to me, if a business is out there, they're considering an M&A transaction, maybe they're in the process of getting that done, or maybe they've gotten an audit notice, right? And so they're going, holy cow, now what do I do? Um, or if like you said, there's just some level of uncertainty in terms of like, am I compliant? Am I not in compliant? What should I be thinking about? Sounds like those are the types of scenarios where they should be picking up the phone and calling someone like you. So let's bridge into that, which is okay. So let's say we got somebody listening to the show and they're like, yep, I need help. What's the best way for them to reach out and get a hold of you guys?
Well, I think the best way that I have here is, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn every day, so so I think I'm sure we could put my QR code or my notes, or to get everybody connected. But I'd love to just reach out, and then and you can find me there, and then we can connect on there, and then figure out a way to have a conversation. Hopefully, if you're in Texas, give me a buzz. We'll go have a dinner or a drink sometime, and that would be great,
Yep.
and
Yep.
talk about what those challenges are.
Fantastic. And that's Cody, Cody, Dixon, Dixon on LinkedIn.
That's great.
Alvarez and Marsal, otherwise known as A&M, but we don't get that confused with the university in Texas. Well, Cody, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciated your insights and your suggestions, and also just what you guys are doing to help make sure that businesses are covered, and making sure they're not mounting or growing a mounting compliance liability for their business. So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I'm very excited to be here and appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for everybody else listening, again, hope you had a good, I hope this was helpful to you. Hopefully you learned a few things about tax compliance and how to maybe use some technology to solve some of that tax complexity. And keep liking and subscribing, and we will see you soon at the next show.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
Yep. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Cody. Appreciate it.